All right. So thank you all for joining us for the webinar today. Um, our webinar this afternoon is Improve Your Survey Response Rate.
Or else.
All right. So today, my name is Howard Yermish. I'm our Director of Customer Success here at Internet Creations.
And hi, everybody. My name is Anthony Pica. I'm the Director of Marketing at Internet Creations, and I'm really excited to be here with Howard and you all today.
So we're going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. And if you have questions during the webinar, we want to make sure that you ask those questions and that we answer those. So please use the little questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface. So just moving on, let's talk about our agenda this afternoon. So we're going to get started by talking about why response rate matters. We're then going to classify the problems with surveys into 4 larger groups. We will then talk about certain attributes of surveys that get higher response rates. And then we'll talk through some use case and examples. And as a bonus, we're going to give you a sneak peek of a brand new feature of our product, Simple Survey for Salesforce, that we think will absolutely help you with response rates. So why does response rate matter?
So the point of increasing your response rate is to make sure you have more data so that you can ultimately improve your products and your business processes and even train your people. And with effortless surveys comes increased response rates, and then you have more data to perform analytics on, and then you can make smarter business decisions.
And one of the things that I always think is important to note here is sometimes people will hesitate to start their surveying process because they're not ready for it yet, or they know they want to make some changes, or they know they want something to be different before they start surveying. And I think it's really important that you do measure what is your current state so that as you move and make those changes, you're actually seeing that improvement and your customers are confirming that with you, as opposed to just assuming that the changes you're about to make sense. Again, the more data you have, the smarter business decisions that you can make. So there are problems with surveys, right, Anthony?
Yep.
Definite problems. And I think they come in 4 different categories. The first one is the category of you are being ignored with your surveys.
Yeah, you have to make sure that your customers are not receiving too many surveys, and that includes surveys from your own organization. And you also have to remember that there are other organizations out there that are also surveying. So when you combine those 2 factors, you can imagine how many surveys you get. Howard, how many surveys would you say you get like per week?
Per week, it's at least 15 or 20 surveys, and it's some weeks it's more. Sometimes I will get multiple surveys from companies where I don't even remember that I bought something from that company. So I have no idea why they would do it, which brings us to that point about the survey being sent out of the blue, where it's like, wait a second, why did you send me this now? It just doesn't make any sense. The other thing that sometimes will happen is I'll get a survey, but I don't even have any idea where it's from, or they address it weirdly. So I got a survey, you saw this last week, where it was addressed to like sample survey recipient. And I just started laughing because it was like, well, they clearly don't have this thing set up properly.
Just the other week, my wife and I stayed at a hotel, had a great time. And the next day I received a survey in my inbox, and the survey was addressed, like the from name was an email address. I'm like, okay, how did this spam message not get caught by Gmail? But due to my inquisitive marketing nature, I dove into the email to see what this was, and I still didn't know who it was from. So I was suspicious, dug a little deeper, and I determined that it was from the hotel, but apparently they outsourced it to another survey provider who didn't really have their survey and their email service configured properly.
Did they have the logo on it at least so you could recognize it?
Actually, the logo was not even in there. It took me quite a bit of research to figure out who it was from.
And I think it's fair to say that the only reason you did that digging is because of your morbid curiosity, being someone in marketing, to look through to see what those issues were. Is that fair?
Yep, absolutely. And if you could guess, I did not end up taking that survey.
I don't understand why, but moving on. The second problem is that your surveys aren't being completed. Now, this is a problem that happens for a number of different reasons, some of which are the email messages that you're getting and the landing pages that you're going to are not mobile friendly. So I think about when I might be inclined to take a survey. It is often when I am stuck somewhere and checking email and I'm looking going, oh, okay, this one's from a company that I like. Let me take their survey. I'm stuck here at this dentist office waiting, to be drilled or something like that. So I click that, and now I can't read any of the questions because it's not mobile friendly and it's too tiny.
Yeah, and you may say, okay, I'm going to take this survey when I get back to my house, but more often than not, probably you don't dig the survey up because you have other important things to do as well. And then let's say the landing page is mobile friendly, you click into it, and now you see an onslaught of questions. You have 10 questions, and it just feels overwhelming.
Yeah, well, I always think about the progress bar that you let's say you answer like 10 questions on the first page, and then the second you click and it says next, and now the progress bar says 11% of the survey. That is not a quick, friendly survey. That is a survey that is asking way too much. And a lot of those questions, I look at them and they just don't feel relevant to my experience. I feel like I have to think too hard and I start making up answers just to get through it. Even worse, at the end of when you finally get through a survey, if you realize that, oh, there's an error because I didn't complete one field because you're requiring certain fields. Those things really, make me crazy. Mm-hmm. So the third problem has to do with whether or not people feel like you're going to do something with that data.
Yeah, let's take an example of a question that goes along as, what was your experience like? And it's just really open-ended. By simply making a question more specific, for example, what was your favorite feature of the product? You'll make it less effortless for the customer to provide an answer. And you'll get more meaningful data because it's regarding something specific that you're really interested in.
The other thing is, if it doesn't feel like there's any business process to follow up on those surveys, or that you could even follow up with it, you're going to degrade that overall survey experience because customers aren't going to believe that you're doing anything with the data. So that to me is another really, really big problem. And even if you do, you don't want to have just an automatic responder, hey, thanks for filling out the survey. That doesn't feel like there's a person listening. Remember that the recipient is a person who is answering and giving of their time. You need to reflect that by giving of your own time and acknowledging. The fourth problem is really all about the totality of that survey experience in terms of how it's going to make your customers feel.
Yeah, you need to make sure that you're delivering a positive brand impression by making sure your survey emails are properly branded, by making sure they don't end up in a spam trap, by making sure all of your questions are easy to take and they're not cryptic. You'll be better off and make a positive brand impression and instill trust in your customer. It's very important to make sure every touch point is a great customer experience.
I think about, I go to the car dealer to get my car serviced. And after each visit, I get a sort of a preemptive message from them that says, you're going to get a survey from Volkswagen of America about your experience. If there's any reason you wouldn't give us 10s on everything, please contact us so we can fix it. Now, I understand that they are getting rated by how well their survey scores are, but they're actually telling me subtly that they don't really want you to give anything other than a 10, because what they care about is their score, not actually changing the process, making a meaningful improvement that would actually relate to my experience. So just because I tell them that I didn't like their experience and they go, oh, we'll fix that next time, isn't going to compel me to give them a 10 this time. So I really think this is something where sometimes people miss because they focus on the wrong metric. So Anthony, what does or else mean?
Well, let's say that we have a $50,000 budget to solicit feedback on customer satisfaction throughout the year. And our surveys are not conducive to those that are effortless and increase response rates. You're essentially going to waste that entire budget. You're going to waste all of the time and energy that your coworkers have spent on creating the automation and the business processes. You're going to lose trust in your customer because their experience with your survey is not going to truly resemble the quality of your brand, and you may tarnish your brand image. And next year, you may not get budget to continue surveying.
And I wanted to bring up this one point before we move on. The study that this experience trends is 79% of respondents are planning to use customer feedback data to improve their service processes. Now, what that means is the response rate gets you actual things you can do something with. If you have a very low response rate, you might be hearing from your edge cases. And this is something that before we move on to a little discussion about those edge cases, we're going to put a little poll out there. So let me launch this poll. But the questions basically is this: which of these problems is your current surveying process suffering from? So I'm going to launch that poll, and you can start answering it. But while you are answering it and going through, so please make sure to put your answers in, I'm going to talk about a thing called the realm of complacency. So while you're putting these answers in, we'll get there. So think about the customer base that you have. On one end of the scale, you have your people who don't really like the product and probably shouldn't be using it. And on the other end of the scale, you've got your vocal enthusiasts, the people who love your product and are using it in all kinds of amazing ways. So think about the haters on one edge and the people who love it on the other edge. So those people are very vocal, some positive, some negative. It's pretty easy for people who are vocal, it's easy to get feedback from them. So that's the kind of feedback that sometimes it doesn't necessarily apply. So you might be looking at particular things in terms of, hey, the product enthusiasts are using your products in ways that nobody else does, but maybe more people should, but they're suggesting things or giving you feedback that doesn't really apply to your typical user. Same thing with your haters. They hate what you're doing. It's the wrong product for them. They just had a bad experience and they're, upset. You're getting their feedback that's also not applicable to your typical user. So now think about that study where 79% of people are going to be taking that feedback and changing their process for it. Our goal is to get to the center. And in that center is your typical user. But you don't get to the center unless you get a higher response rate. That's where that innovation happens. And what I'm going to do before I'm going to actually, a lot of you have voted. Please get your votes in last minute here. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to do a quick vote. Pop that in there. All right, I'm going to close up that poll, and then we will finish talking about the realm of complacency. All right, so now what we were talking about earlier, where you have your vocal users on one side that are product haters and the product enthusiasts also vocal on the other side, it's those sort of quiet people who don't really have a problem and they just have great suggestions, but you can't get them and inspire them to act. So your really great feedback happens in that middle, but that's where the people are complacent. You've got to incent them to respond. And at the very least, you have to make it easy for them to respond, because that's where your innovation is going to happen on your product. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to share the results of this poll. And so a couple things that we're seeing in general, the top two things are lack of follow-up and not mobile friendly. Those are super duper important. And I'm glad to see that lack of follow-up is really there, because we're about to talk about that as a key point in your business process. It's also nice to see people are suffering with too many questions, as well as having required questions and not sent when the experience is top of mind. So that's pretty great. I want to make sure that we'll take this moment before we jump through to answer a couple of questions. So we've got one question that says, the problem is my surveys currently have is that you haven't started using it. Well, that's what we talked about at the beginning, right, Anthony? Mm-hmm. You have to just get started. You're going to get feedback you don't like, but that feedback is the place to start from to change. So we want to make sure that that is there. We also want to make sure, the other question is, we're currently using your product, we don't have any of these problems. That's great. I feel like we need to send surveys for other things. You know what? We're actually going to get to that in a second too with our different use cases. That's a really great question, which is the kinds of things you should be surveying on. So pretty fabulous questions. Keep them coming. We like it. Let's move on. And what we're going to talk about is kind of our results here. We want to make sure that surveys are simple, friendly, and timely.
right? So what are some of like the solutions to those four problems? Well, first off, you need to make sure your surveys are mobile friendly, especially in 2018, where people are using their mobile devices at an increasing rate, whether they're waiting in line at the grocery store, at a movie theater. And you can use a product called Litmus to actually test if your surveys are responsive and mobile friendly on devices that you may not own. It's a really great product. And it's also really important to keep your surveys really short and make it super easy and effortless for your customers to provide feedback. For example, within the survey email itself, one recommendation is to make it so that the survey is actually takeable with just one click from the survey email, and then you can capture that feedback. To make sure surveys are less than a minute long. People are really busy and a lot of things are competing for their time. Depending on the type of survey you're taking, we recommend less than 5 questions and typically only have one open text area box.
Yeah, that I think about it this way. If I'm going to wax poetic about any response that I give, I can only do it one time. After that, it's like, well, I already talked about that. So sometimes I'll see surveys where it asks lots of open-ended questions, and they're exhausting because yes, it might be 3 open-ended questions, but an open-ended question takes a lot of mental effort to do. So by the time you get to the 3rd one, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and you need to make sure your questions are relevant and worded in a way that they're very easy for the customer to think about and provide you with feedback on. You don't want to have complex questions or loaded questions, and you want to make sure your surveys are timely. At Internet Creations, we've sent relationship or engagement surveys in the past where it's like randomly at 1 year, 1 day out of the year, but we found that transactional surveys, for example, when a case is closed, provide us with more meaningful feedback because their experience is top of the mind for the customer. And so they're able to provide you with that meaningful feedback.
And one of the things that we also do, and this is to avoid over surveying our customers, is look, some of our customers will open up a couple of cases. This is something that Simple Survey for Salesforce does to avoid survey fatigue, where it says, look, if they've gotten a survey within the last week, don't send them another one. The last point that we have here is how we follow up. We've put some processes in place, used the automation benefits of Salesforce to make it easy for us to do human actions and respond.
So we have a question where companies keep sending emails reminding people to take the survey. So my take on that is, I think one reminder is okay, but beyond that, it can get annoying, right? And when you get annoying, that can make people, it can kind of tarnish your brand, right? If you're just sending people a bunch of emails, not only do people get a lot of surveys, but there's so many emails that get bombarded into your inbox. And if you're the company that is just sending email after email, that can really get annoying. So my recommendation would be to send one reminder.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think if I didn't want to take the survey, then sure, remind me, but don't keep bugging me. That would make me crazy. The thing that we wanted to get to are these business use cases. So the typical one that we like to talk about is case closure. You've helped someone through product support, through customer support. When that support case closes, we want to send a survey as a follow-up, just to make sure that that support experience was good.
Another reason to send a survey is to solicit feedback on your sales process, right? So in Salesforce, if you have an opportunity that is closed won or closed lost, you can automatically trigger a survey to be sent to solicit feedback on not only the sales process, but perhaps also the sales representative. And you can use that to improve your business processes and perhaps even coach as well.
Absolutely. I also like project milestones, thinking about people who do maybe professional services projects or long-term projects where they've got multiple points in the project. where think about it this way: if they're going to write you a check at a certain point in the project, that's not a bad time to make sure that the project is going well. So collecting feedback that's relevant to that point in the project. Maybe you've got 3 phases of a project, and at the end of the first phase, you send a survey that asks about how that first phase went, and maybe has are there any things that you want to get fixed for the second phase? Get it in the moment, collect that feedback. You can course correct before it becomes a problem.
Another example is if you're a manufacturer and you have a return merchandise authorization or a warranty process, you can solicit feedback on that. For example, a few weeks ago, I bought the new Google Pixel Buds and they stopped working. So I got on Google support, did a little troubleshooting, and then they said, send it back and we'll send you a new one. After the process of going through that, I got a survey in my email that it was pretty easy to take. So I took it, and that survey just sealed the deal for me. It made me feel very valued as a customer. And now Google has feedback and information so they can improve their processes too.
The side benefit of that is that they received your product back, because now that sort of process is closing the loop. So they did get it, everything is fine. So it's a nice way to do it. I think of another version, another example use case that you could do. Salesforce is really pushing field service lightning. So think about field service visits. When someone shows up at your office for doing some service, or they show up to your house to fix cable or whatever have you. A person walked into your place of business. When they leave, they're closing up that visit. So automating the surveys to come out as a result of those visits is a really impactful way to collect feedback in the moment. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do here at Internet Creations, which is we look at some specific things to make sure that we're following up properly. And part of that is looking at things like anytime a customer gives us a low score on one of those case closure emails, we're going to follow up, even if they give us no more comments. A low score equals someone who is the manager of that person is going to look at the case, see what could have gone on, and I personally send out a message that says, hey, you gave us a lower score. What did we miss? What messed up? I'm looking at the case and I don't understand it. Or, hey, I saw a thing in the case that made sense for you to give that low score. Let me apologize before you even gave us the feedback and ask for more feedback. I actually use that low score to ask, what else can you tell us? Anytime there's a comment on a survey, I want to make sure there's a task that gets created for us to review the comment, whether it's positive or negative. And the new thing that we're going to add to our process is actually related to this new feature, which is this partial response process. So we can do things so that if someone started completing the survey, but they've not finished it, we can still look at that result.
It's really important to follow up because you're letting the customer know you're listening, and you're also encouraging them to take your future survey so you get even more data. And it's kind of like a feedback loop where you get more responses, you follow up, and then you get more responses.
All right, so moving right along, Anthony, talk to me about incentives. This is something that lots of marketing teams look at with their survey programs to really kind of get more response rate.
On one hand, you can offer an incentive to increase your survey responses, right? But the flip side of that is that it may skew your data. You may get people to take your surveys that just want a chance to win your prize. And for that reason, they may quickly fill out the survey and not provide you with meaningful feedback, and your data is skewed. My general rule of thumb is that for the relationship or engagement surveys that you send maybe once or twice a year, maybe consider offering an incentive. But for the transactional surveys that are more in the moment, if your surveys are effortless and easy to take, you may not need to offer an incentive. In fact, I would recommend you don't.
I think one way that you may, like if you said, hey, we're not getting enough of that middle realm of complacency feedback, if we're not really tapping into the realm of complacency, you might want to use a small incentive that is guaranteed. So rather than saying things like, you might be one of 5 people this month to win a $50 gift card, which A, feels like a low probability that I'm going to win, and B, isn't that great of a prize. That's compared to, hey, we're going to send you a $5 Starbucks gift card for finishing this. you know you're going to get it. It's not maybe you'll get it, it's you will definitely get it. Maybe that's a way to use an incentive to start finding that middle of the road and improving your survey response rate.
So speaking of incentives, it's now survey time.
All right, so what does that mean, now survey time? It means that we're sending you a survey right now. So for everyone who registered for this webinar, check your email while we go, and you're going to get a survey. By replying to this survey, that is also your contest entry to win the Amazon Echo Dot. So we're hoping we get great response rate from the people who are currently attending. And the other thing is we're going to announce the prize winner from someone who is attending right now. So don't check out at the last minute. Respond to those surveys. Make sure that you put in whatever answers as possible. And we're going to pick a winner from people who've responded to the survey and who are currently attending. But while you're working on that, I want to show you a new feature for Simple Survey. This feature is called Capture Partial Responses. What does that mean? That means, let's say someone clicks on your survey, they start taking that survey, but they don't click the submit button. They just close the tab, they leave. We're going to capture that in progress data so that you have more data to work with. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to start by going over here to my developer org. So in here, I've got this thumbs up case, and I'm just going to close it. And this will send, I have this set up so that when the case is closed, it's going to send my Irish counterpart, the O'Yermish clan. It's going to send Howard O'Yermish a quick survey for that. So I'm going to now pop over here to my mail, and I just got a new survey here. And here we go. It says, did we meet your expectations? Of course we did. I'm going to give us a thumbs up. So when I give us that thumbs up, I've got to this landing page. It's showing my thumbs up there. Give me some responses here. I'm going to jump back over to my developer org. I'm going to look at these surveys. And these are the surveys that are related here. And you'll notice this first survey that we're showing here is, it's this survey 29, brand new survey. I'm going to open it up. And what we're going to see is it's a 0 to 1 scales. It's 0 is thumbs down, 1 is thumbs up. It's giving me a 1 for that thumbs up. You'll notice there's no comments, there's no response rate question, and it's showing me responded. So all I've done in that responded status is clicked on that initial entry. Let me jump back over to the landing page. So I'll pick an answer and I'll just say, I want to, it matters because measuring my current state so I can move to an ideal state. And I'm going to think about my answer here. So I'm going to go, let me think. I haven't clicked the submit button. I just started typing. I'm going to jump back over here to this survey record, and let's do a little refresh of this tab in Salesforce. And it's showing me, I still have my 1 for thumbs up. There's my comments that I haven't submitted for let me think. The response that I picked, the measuring your current state response, and this partial response status. So this is something where at this point, if I were to close out this tab, it's going to save this survey result as a partial response. I never submitted, but I have some data to work with. So if I jump back over here, and I'm going to change it to all of the above because I know that's right. And then I'm going to say, simple survey is awesome. Change my answer there. And I'm going to click submit updates. So now I can look at that partial response back here. Instead of it being partial, I'm going to refresh this tab, get the updated result. You'll see my 1 is still there. My all of the above is picked. My new comments are there, and it's now showing the status of completed. So now you're going to have 3 statuses to look at. A responded for someone who just clicked that first response, a partial for a person who started finishing their survey but didn't finish, and completed because they did click the submit button. So that's a great way. Let's say you have 5 questions, but nobody ever answers questions 4 and 5, but you want the answer to question 4. You might change the order of your questions to try to get those responses out of there. But that's a quick look at Simple Survey's new Capture Partial Response feature, which is going to be available very shortly on the App Exchange.
Drum roll, please. And we have a winner.
Let's make sure that that person is here.
It is Crystal W.
Hang on a second. Let's make sure she's still in attendance.
Yes.
Yes.
She is. Wow, on the first try. Congrats,
Awesome.
Crystal.
So we will get in contact with you to make sure that you get that survey, or excuse me, that survey, the Echo Dot. It is a custom Echo. Is it a custom Echo Dot?
Absolutely.
It has the Internet Creations logo on it. We hope you enjoy it. And you can say things like, Alexa, play Jeopardy, and have fun with that. I think if you had me on speakers, I just triggered Jeopardy playing in all of your offices. I apologize for that. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put those into the chat panel. We're going to be hanging out for the next few minutes to answer any other questions. We actually have a quick question from Jason, which says it might be interesting to capture that previous info, as the customer may have wanted to complain, but felt bad and changed their answer. So we probably could do that. I think that might be a little bit there. What we're expecting is that a customer might start answering the survey, but because so much, they might just close the tab. So in closing that tab, by having that partial response, you can act on it, or even ask them, or, let's say they get, for lack of a better term, let's say they give you some kind of answer that might not have been favorable. You could reach out to them and say, hey, I want to make sure you had a good experience. Do you have anything you want to talk to us about? Because you kind of know that they had a complaint. So that's one thing there. Another question just came in, which is about response rate. Well, I've heard from customers that they typically have response rates maybe 5%, under 5%, definitely under 10%. We typically see people getting a response rate after starting with Simple Survey that jumps up to 20%, 25%. Again, it's going to really depend on the kinds of questions you ask, when you're sending your surveys, things like that. My feeling is if you're getting 20% response rate on your surveys, you're in the right place. You're getting good data. Even better if you're at 25% response rate. And I hope that answers your question. We are going to be hanging around, but I'm going to go to our thank you for joining us. So if you were here and you wanted to say, this is awesome, please take a look at Simple Survey for Salesforce. The testimonials that we get are all about improving response rate, getting feedback. You can install a free trial of Simple Survey from the App Exchange, and that is at ic.force.com/simple-survey, which I'm going to drop over here in the chat.
One of the key value propositions of Simple Survey is that the surveys are really effortless to take. They're mobile friendly. You can take them with one click, and that increases the response rates. The other key value proposition is that Simple Survey is 100% native to Salesforce, which means all of your survey data resides in Salesforce, and you don't have to deal with any third-party integrations, and you can leverage all of the Salesforce automation and features that you've come to know and love to trigger surveys to be sent, and then also trigger follow-up actions too.
Got it. So thank you for joining us. There are a couple other questions that we're going to address right here. But if you don't have any more questions, feel free to jump off, and I'm going to actually pause the recording as we go.